welcome Dr. Brenna to the
Thanks so
R.A.W
much.
podcast. I am so excited to have you here today.
I'm really excited to be here.
I actually know nothing about you.
That's
In
fine.
all honesty, this is going to be very raw. We've had quite a few interviews today, and I was told about you from a colleague of mine that said that you're doing some incredible work in our city, which is London, Ontario, Canada, for people that are listening or watching. And you know what? Before we get into all that, I'm going to start like the icebreaker is, what is authenticity mean to you?
That is an interesting question. And I think it depends a lot on your values and knowing your values. So I think you can think you're being authentic, and you can actually be authentic, and that might change over time. So things that are important to you at one point might not be so important. It might not be who you are years down the road. So I think being true to whatever it is that your values are, is probably what I would say is authentic.
Love it. So you just shared some amazing news because I offered you a glass of wine. You're
Yes,
pregnant.
I am.
Congratulations. How far along?
15 weeks.
15 weeks. Okay. And you have
I have twins.
twins.
They just turned 10.
Okay. And you had premature twins.
I had
right?
very premature twins. Yeah.
Want to tell us about that journey?
Sure. Well, anybody who's had kids knows it's not easy from the start. And shout out to all the twin moms out there. It's a
Yes.
whole different ballgame. I had trouble getting pregnant, like I think a lot of higher achieving, high stress women do.
Yes.
So my then partner and I ended up undergoing not IVF, but I did injections.
Okay.
And then we did IUI and had two little eggs there that got released at the same time and implanted at the same time. And yeah, so it was okay for the first bit. And then around 17, 18 weeks, I started having Braxton Hicks contractions, which typically don't start until much later. I was doing my residency in family medicine at that point. Was about halfway through my first year, and so I had a lot of doctors around me, and I was asking, like, is this normal? What's going on? All those kinds of things. And then a couple of weeks later, I started having more and more contractions. I went into the hospital. They said, I actually texted one of my friends who was an OB-GYN resident and said, hey, I'm feeling like this. What should I do? She said, I'm in triage tonight. Come on in. So I went in and got some testing, and they said, well, we can't really find anything, but you are, in labor, like you're having contractions, but there's nothing we can do about it. So go home and come back if you feel. And I was like, if I feel what? She's like, well, if you feel this, this, and this. And I was like, well, I'm feeling all those things right now. So I guess I'll see you guys later. So I went to teaching the next day, and again, about halfway through, it was just like, this just doesn't feel right. So I went back. They kept me overnight, thinking that they would do an ultrasound the next day and then send me home. And the next morning, my cervix had shortened from, I don't know, I think 2.3 to 1.8. And for everybody who's not medical, that's not good in a short amount of time. And so they admitted me to antenatal. And so I didn't end up going home for about 3 months after that. Yeah.
So what were you feeling at that time? Like, what was going through your head? Like, here you are, supposed to be the happiest time of your life, right? Like,
Yes. Well, my aunt had a baby at 23 and a half weeks. And he had really severe cerebral palsy and never actually learned to walk or talk or any of those things. And so obviously those types of thoughts are going through your head, but it was more just, okay, well, this is, I guess, what I'm going to do now. Like, my job is to be here on antenatal and sit tight and count the days. And so I split the days into like 3-hour chunks and was grateful for every hour that went by that these little muffins didn't come out. And so just watched a lot of Netflix, read a lot of books, cried a lot, read a lot of papers and things like that about how to keep twins from being delivered. Obviously, there's nothing really you can do.
right. So did you have a supportive partner?
Yeah, he's a physician as well, or he was in residency at the time, and luckily he was doing his residency at Victoria Hospital. So, I mean, lucky
Bonus.
for him, he didn't have to take any time off. He just went to work and
Right.
said hi to me on the way in and bye to me when he left. So, yeah, so they were born at 30 weeks and went into labor at 28 weeks, and then they were able to stop it. And then we spent 8 weeks in the NICU.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And are they healthy and
Yeah,
thriving now?
perfect.
And
Yeah, no, couldn't ask for better kids, truly.
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. I love hearing the beautiful story that comes out of that hardship, right? Which you just hang on as a mom. You're like, oh my gosh, like what's going to happen,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I
So,
mean, you really have to learn to let go. I think the universe sometimes gives you what you need. And again, being a sort of type A personality,
welcome to the Type A Club.
you know, being told you can't go home or get out of bed for 6 weeks, or else your kids might die, is like, oh, okay, I have no control over anything.
Right. It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? Because we think as human beings we have so much control over it. We don't. It's not even of us, right? So,
It's not.
wow.
Yeah.
So, okay, you are a physician and you specialize in,
Technically, family medicine.
okay,
I did the MD PhD program here at Western, so my background is in like basic science, epigenetics, fetal origins of adult disease, and then I couldn't really decide what I wanted to do, and so family medicine just let me do everything.
so this is interesting because my background's nursing, actually. Did you find knowing as much as you know as a doctor when you were going through all you were with your pregnancy, did that make it harder because you knew the things that maybe the average person wouldn't
I
know?
think maybe yes and no.
Yeah.
I think because of my research background, I knew how to look things up to, verify, get information, or try and, maybe to my own detriment, read more than I probably should have. So I felt like I was well informed, but you do know all the bad things that can happen.
You do. You do. So, before we get into, because I know that you have quite a special practice in what you do with women and how much you help. But I want to ask you, if you were to tell us what your most raw moment in your life was, what would that be?
Well, there's definitely a few, but I guess keeping with the theme that we've been talking about, after the kids were born, I was pretty dead set on breastfeeding, and it was a huge, huge challenge. But when the doctors say the only thing you can do for your kids is give them breast milk, by God, I'm giving them breast milk. And so I remember, I think they were probably about 3 weeks old, and I was pumping every 2 hours. It used to take me about an hour. So it was a wild time of no
Yes.
sleep. And I distinctly remember one night getting up in the middle of the night to pump and just being so exhausted that sort of I had my pumps and whatever. And I was so tired that I just dozed off while I was pumping just for a second, and it all dumped on the ground.
The liquid gold,
Yeah.
right?
And I was just like, just devastated. But it was kind of like okay, well, I guess we just try again. But it was a really like, oh my God.
One of those moments,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And for any breastfeeding mom at home or moms that struggle with breastfeeding will totally understand. We used to call it liquid gold,
Yeah.
right? Like
Oh,
you just,
yeah.
you cannot
No, you
even
cannot.
spill like a
No.
little ounce of
No,
it, right?
the whole like 5 ounces I just dumped on the floor. I was like,
So did you break down and cry, or did you just kind of keep going?
honestly, I don't remember. Probably. It was in the middle of the night. I was by myself. But I was like crying on and off all the time at that point because your emotions and your physiology is just so messed up when you're sleeping like an hour a day.
Right. Yeah. I remember when I was breastfeeding my son, he was failure to thrive. So I had to stop breastfeeding cold turkey. And that was the hardest thing because I think it's better now. But back when I had a baby, it was like there was a lot of pressure to breastfeed,
There is a
right?
lot,
And there still is, but I think it's kind of coming around a little bit.
I think in certain circles it
Yeah.
is.
So I feel your pain there.
Yeah.
So that would be your most raw moment,
Again, there's lots of them.
is there?
My partner and I, my now ex partner and I separated a couple years ago during COVID. So that was obviously not a fun time. Yeah, I don't know. That's the sort of, when you think of just like raw emotion, like you've been broken down and there's nothing, there's no pretending, there's no, it's just, this is just what it is.
Right.
That was the moment that really sort of came to mind.
So when you separated
Yeah.
from the twins' dad, did you take time to process that, or you just strike me as someone that just keeps going? You just keep getting up and you keep going, and you're like, okay, it is what it is.
I mean, I think everybody should be in therapy, and I love my therapist, and so
Right.
we have, gone through and processed that in time. I think in the immediate, days afterwards, you're just trying to figure out what you're going to do. And I was more concerned, I think the kids were 5 or 6 at that point. How am I going to not let them screw this up? No, how am I not going to let this screw them up?
Right. And how are they doing?
Great.
Kids are so resilient.
Kids are so resilient. The kids are so resilient when the parents take care of themselves and I think act in ways that are consistent with their values, that they just try and be good humans. And so I think, we've done a really good job of just, we both care about each other and we care about the kids. And we were very young when we got together, and you grow separately and you want different things, and it's sad, but that doesn't, I think, negate what you had. I had a lot of people who would say things like, oh, you talk about failed marriages, and I really don't think we failed. I think we were wildly successful. I think we just ended up at a place where we needed to go our separate ways, and I think we both understood that was better for us and better for the kids. So
That's great.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that sometimes people aren't meant to follow your whole path through, right? Because you're growing maybe in a different direction. Maybe they're not meant to walk that path with you, and that's okay. I think you're actually a stronger, better person for recognizing that and letting the person go if they're not your person anymore, right? I think that takes true authenticity, right? So
to sort of realize that, okay, I think we would both be happier afterwards, although it's going to suck in the short term.
right.
We're sort of in this for the long game, so.
So are you in a new, obviously?
Well, I'm pregnant.
You're
so-
pregnant, so
Yes, I am.
yeah, that's great. And are you looking forward to this?
I am. It's a mix of, I guess, excitement and terror.
Because of, yeah.
So you never really know what's going to happen. Trying to figure out, with the clinic and all the different moving parts, how to make sure that you can keep all the balls in the air even. And I think that's one of the things that women struggle with a lot is,
Goodness.
how do I make sure everybody else is okay while I do this other thing?
Would you say that do you have faith? Like, do you have like,
I was
are you
raised Roman
religious?
Catholic. I think that, it's an interesting question. I think things happen and you don't really have control over it. And so if this pregnancy is supposed to go smoothly, it will. And if there's something else that me or my partner are supposed to learn from it, then we will. And
It's a good way of looking at
just
it.
can't, you can't change it.
It's not up to us,
It's
is
not.
it? Right? So you
No.
just kind of go with the flow. And
Yeah.
I like your outlook. You're type A, but you're
Yeah.
like relaxed.
Like I said, I think that time in the hospital was just what I needed.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your clinic
Yeah.
because you really hold a lot of space, a lot of beautiful space for women that are going through a lot. And I don't want to bash family doctors in any way because I think that you're overworked, underpaid. Like you have a lot going on, and you give as much as you can, but sometimes that 15 minutes in the doctor's office just
It's not
isn't
enough.
enough, right?
No, it's not enough.
Tell me how you came about
Yeah.
this clinic and a little bit more about it because I think
Sure.
it's fascinating.
So when I started my practice in 2016, I knew I only wanted to take individuals who didn't already have a family doctor. Because when I was in my residency, I saw so many people like shopping around, and just with the number of people that didn't have care, it didn't feel right. So I took all the applications and onboarded a bunch of people, and me and my naive new doctor self, I'm going to dive deep into this and figure out the root cause of these patients' issues and go from there. And I had been doing some reading, obviously, I had just had my kids. And so I was figuring out, how do I manage my own shit so that I don't give it to them?
Right.
And in doing that, I came across a book called The Deepest Well by Nadine Burke-Harris that was really practice changing for me. And she talks about something called adverse childhood experiences, which the data has been around for many, 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 many years. And I was shocked that I didn't learn about this in medical school.
Right.
But it's this idea that the things that happen to you when you're younger change the way that your brain develops and can put you at higher or lower risk for a bunch of different things. And so when I was onboarding and talking to these patients, it became really clear that most of them, I went back and did the calculations at some point, and I think it's like 65% had experienced childhood sexual abuse and 80% had had some form of childhood abuse. And understanding that and talking more with them and saying, well, what could have been different? Like, what could somebody have done to change something? Like, was there anybody who you could have told? Or, you know what I mean? What could we have done if we knew back then what we know now? And just seeing the referrals being made and people going to treatment, and sometimes they would get a little better, but a lot of the time they would maybe even get worse. And the resources that it took to try and help these people after the fact was so astronomical. I just thought, well, this feels like a losing battle. It just doesn't feel like I'm doing much good right now. And so I thought, well, I would really like to go back and try and prevent all of this from happening rather than just throwing another medication in there and hoping for the best. Right. And so over the next couple of years, threw the idea around, and kind of what I said about how, I don't think my first marriage was a failure, that we had worked really hard and had been able to put away some money. So that when we separated, I actually had some money that I could do something with. And so I was trying to figure out what that might be. And when you're feeling brave, I guess you feel brave in a bunch of different areas. And so said, I'm just going to do it and see what happens. We had started it on a smaller scale at the clinic that I worked at before, just providing services for moms after delivery, just trying to really do that early intervention with breastfeeding and that kind of stuff. But then just thinking, okay, what if we were going to do this really well? What would it look like? I'm really the kind of person that thinks, well, what would the best case scenario look like? And then how close can we get to that? Because if I don't even know what I want, then I'm definitely not going to get there.
Right.
So if we were going to design something that would serve these families in the best way possible, what would that look like, and how close can we get to it?
So what would you say is sort of the specialty at this clinic that you're kind of known for?
Ooh, I don't know if I'm the one to answer that.
No.
We try very hard to give people the space they need and the understanding they need and the information they need to make choices that make sense for them. So if you don't know how what you've experienced has affected you, it's really hard to make decisions around that.
Right.
if you don't know what resources are available, it's really hard to decide where you're going to put your energy. And if you've been told that you have a condition that's not treatable or something, for example, we see a lot of women who've been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And so if you get that label, there's a lot of stuff that goes with it, when in fact, we're starting to learn that maybe it's not that, maybe it's not a personality disorder, maybe it's trauma plus ADHD plus or minus other things that are treatable.
Hormones and
Yeah.
menopause and
Like we can actually do something about from a physiologic standpoint. And so we try to see the whole person, but not ask them to do things that we know are not reasonable.
That's right. I'm the one that did not turn my phone off. That's okay. It'll just keep going. We're fine. It's raw.
There we go. It is what it is.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, not at all. So, I've worked in the hospital, I've worked outside the hospital, I've worked in mental health, I've worked in addictions, I've worked in eating disorders, and all of those different places. And what I really wanted to do was try and bring that together in a way that, while we're interested in helping the parents, the primary goal is to actually help the kids.
Right. Because once you've helped the parents, you're in turn helping the children.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
and you've got a name for the clinic, right?
It's called GROW, which is an acronym.
Okay.
It stands for Grounded Roots, Open Wings. Yeah, so the idea is that that's what we want to give our kids.
Love that. Love that. I'm going to ask you some more fun questions, a little bit more personal questions. Who would your ride or die be?
What do you mean by that?
If you say you ended up in jail and you had one call to make, who would that be?
Well, we similarly along that sort of line, we would joke in clinic that, like, if you killed somebody and needed someone to help you move the body, who would you call?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we have, she's actually taking a break from the clinic right now because she's gone back to school. But I met her on my, I don't know, first or second week of practice, and she was our medical office assistant, and she's followed me through 2 or 3 clinic moves, and, just is like the most badass woman. So her name's Vanessa. So I'm pretty sure everybody that knows her, she'd be the one that
They would call.
they would call.
Okay, so this leads me to your next jail question.
Uh-oh.
If you were committed of a crime and we didn't know why, what do you think your friends and family would think you were committed for?
Oh, for killing somebody who sexually abused kids.
Right there with you.
Somebody hurt my kid or a kid that I cared about.
That didn't even take you a
Nope.
second to answer. Yeah, Mama Bear comes right out. Wow. Okay, if you could bring everybody that you have ever met in your life, dead or alive, all into one room,
It has to be somebody I've met.
somebody you've met, and you could only look for one person, who would it be?
I feel like if I have that opportunity, it should be somebody that I didn't really get a chance to talk to, but I really would have loved to talk to. So my Baba probably died when I was like 5 or 6. When I divorced my first husband, I didn't actually take my maiden name. I wanted something different. So I went back as far as I could to find the maiden name of the woman. And it was her maiden name that I took.
Oh, wow.
So I heard she was again, I only met her a few times when I was younger, but I heard she was a pretty badass woman.
Really?
Yeah, and I would have loved
awesome.
to know more about her. She was a bootlegger at some point. She left her husband to live in sin with a farmhand. She lost a kid walking in the freezing cold from one farm to another in Manitoba or something. So, yeah,
Would you have a specific question you'd want to ask her?
I just would want to know more about her. I just would
She
want.
sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
I'd want to know about her
Yeah.
too, right? Wow. Favorite book?
Growing Up, Where the Red Fern Grows.
Oh, okay.
That was the book that got me addicted to reading, my mom said. When she found me in the in the big chair reading with tears streaming down my face. She knew I was hooked.
Aw, that's sweet.
Favorite book now? I don't know. I've been reading more nonfiction.
Have you?
So I really like Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek.
Much of a reader.
Audiobooks.
Audiobooks.
Brene Brown is always a good one.
Brene Brown.
Untamed, I've read recently, and I liked.
Nice. Would you say that you had a good upbringing?
Yeah.
Good childhood?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I mean, nobody's perfect. Nobody's childhood is perfect. Anybody who comes in and says, "Oh, it was great," they're clearly hiding something.
100%. 100%.
But my parents did the absolute best they could with what they had, and we always knew we were loved. We always knew that, no matter what we wanted to do, we would be supported. So.
And did you always know that you wanted to be a doctor?
Apparently, yes.
Really? From a young age?
Apparently, my mom tells me when I was like 5.
You just
That's what.
hit the stethoscope and you were like
I don't
trying
even
to
know.
fix everybody?
She was just like, you just said you're going to be a doctor, and nobody in my family is a doctor, and we didn't know anybody who was a doctor, and so all the way along, my mom was like, you don't have to do that if you don't want to, and I was like, no, obviously I'm going to.
If there was one thing that you could change about yourself, if anything, what would it be?
Oh. That is a very interesting question that I could change about myself. I tend to, as part of my upbringing, take responsibility, I think, for things that are not mine. And so it's something that I continue to work on. So maybe even just like a little less of that, or maybe coming to that a little earlier in my life.
I think that you do some incredible work out there, and I'm so honored to have you sitting here because a friend of mine that you helped, that who will remain nameless, said that you just held so much space at a really dark time in her life, and I think it's really important for women and men to know what you're doing. And
Thank you.
if I'm going to ask you a direct question, I'm going to
Yeah.
ask you to look at the camera and speak, just this camera here. If there's a woman out there right now listening or watching and she's suffering or going through something, what would you want her to know?
That you're not alone, that we talk about how wonderful having children are and how great they are, but I don't think we talk enough about how challenging it is and how you actually have to lose yourself and become a different person, and that can be really hard. And so find your tribe, find your supports, find your people. The best thing that I think moms can have is other women who are moms to help normalize
100%.
all of the things that you're going through. So likely what you're going through is probably pretty normal, and a lot of other people have experienced that before, so just reach out.
That's beautiful. This podcast isn't about me, but I'm going to bring it just because of something you said. Being the publisher of the Mom and Caregiver magazine, I felt so much pressure that I always had to be the perfect mom. And I could never say very raw and honestly, there was times where I didn't, and I'm sorry if my son is watching, that I didn't want to hang out with him. I really didn't. I wasn't the mom that was going to stay at home and get on the ground and play trucks with him all day.
And I think it's so sad.
And no one says that. And I think we need to, because it's okay.
Yes.
It's actually okay.
It's actually more than okay.
Yeah, and it's better, right?
It's actually more than okay, because, and this is one thing I wish every parent knew, is that the goal is not to be perfectly attuned with your kids all the time. That actually creates like assholes,
Yeah.
to be honest.
It does. It
If
does.
you're always doing exactly what your kids want at exactly the right time, they don't learn how to deal with disappointment. They don't learn how to deal with conflict. They don't learn how to deal with their own emotions.
Right. And I think recognizing that that is not the type of parent you are. I love my son to bits. He's an amazing kid and he's grown up well. And I'm better for it because I knew that I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I needed to be around adults, and like I spent my fair share of time with him, but I recognized very early on, and I was always afraid to say this.
And he's better off because you were yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So
So the most important thing that parents can do is repair. When you make a mistake, just repair. Take responsibility and repair, apologize, figure it out. But
I'm working on that. He would probably say my mom's not the best at apologizing because the ego gets in the way, and then and my upbringing has been, who do you think you are? Like you're just supposed to be seen, not heard, right? But I actually love that about him because he does have a beautiful, strong personality. But because I wasn't allowed to have a voice growing up, I sometimes have that bashing and the conflict, and it's beautiful that he actually recognizes that and he calls me out on my shit. So
that's awesome.
yeah, it is amazing.
Well,
So
congratulations for raising that kind of a kid and breaking
got
that
a
cycle.
great dad too, and yeah, and I think we co-parent lovely together. And
awesome.
I think that's important too. When parents decide to not be together, the kids didn't make that choice.
No.
And at one point you loved this person and you had a child with them. So when I hear parents
Let's not
like
be that bad.
right? Exactly. So try to hang on to that and not let your children pay for that. Right?
Well, and the other thing is your kids are half the other person.
Exactly.
So if they hear you talking about them, it's
they're-
impossible for them not to internalize that in some way.
100%. I could talk to you forever. I could really go on and on. But you know what? Thank you again for being here. And I look forward to getting to know you better. And yeah, so
If I can just put in one plug for Grow.
Yeah.
So we are unfortunately struggling financially, I think, as a lot of charities and not-for-profit organizations are. And so we're looking to have to shut down services in the new year if we're not able to come up with some funding. So we are a registered charity. If there's anybody who, feels like I do that this is really important work and would like to support us, please reach out. We're really hoping to still be able to, continue to serve those families.
Let's get real.